What's going on, everybody? Talk tonight about something that is kind of inherent when you're arrested for anything. It's a societal norm, I would say. It goes back to the first punishments in our society. Um, as a society, we typically tend to shun criminals. We tend to shun murderers. We tend to shun child molesters. We tend to shun people that have committed financial crimes. As a whole, people that are accused of, and that can be enough sometimes, and that can have disastrous effects if it isn't true. But people that are accused of a crime, and also especially those who are convicted of a crime or plead guilty to a crime, our society tends to shun them. You have people that may break laws and they get fired from their job as a result of that in and of itself, even though the crime may have had nothing to do with their job per se. It happens. There's a writer that I like. His name's Charles Bukowski, and he has a quote. It says, "If you want to find out who your real friends are, get yourself a jail sentence." And that is 100% true. If you want to find out who really cares about you and who really is your friend, go out and get arrested one time, DUI, or get accused of an assault or anything else. And that brings me to the topic of the video tonight. It's going to be the media and how that plays into charges and cases and those kinds of things. So, there's several instances or things I can think about offhand that relate to the media and how they portray things. So, whether politically or on one side or the other, it isn't really important in this kind of a context. When I'm talking about political figures that are accused of something, although that has something to do with it, it's still the same concept. But I know myself, before I was arrested, I generally, errantly, I would look at the news and I would see the stories of the day. The Dow Jones is up, whatever points. The latest lottery numbers are 3, 4, and 5. And then you'd have the local crime reports or the local other types of situations that happen. And in those things, you're going to see videos of people that are arrested, they're arraigned, there's a standoff, late breaking news, so-and-so has been arrested and accused of blah, blah, blah. And that plays into a lot of it. And it really forms the beginning of a lot of things when it comes to the criminal justice system. I think, I would read those reports in the newspaper, or read them on my phone, or see them in the news, and I would believe them at face value. That's not to say that the police and prosecutors are always lying, because they're not. I'm not saying that. In my experience in prison, the majority of people that are in prison are not guilty. They're not guilty because their lawyer screwed them, or because the witness misidentified them, or because that video wasn't them, it was their twin brother, or whatever other ludicrous kind of explanations you may have. In general, a lot of people that are in prison are guilty, and are guilty of what they're accused of or what they did. So that takes that off the table. But there are situations that happen where someone goes through that system and is arrested. It's public information, because prisoners, by and large, have very limited to no privacy rights, and that has bad effects. But people that are accused of crimes, that can be enough to ruin someone's life, to ruin their reputation, and that's just the news itself saying this person has been accused of, or arrested of, or convicted of this. That can ruin someone's life in and of itself. But then when you have news agencies that may or may not have a slant or a bias, that really begins to kind of wear away at the integrity of what's reported. And so you have to ask yourself questions. There's a case, and it was made into a movie, and there's other things that it's been made into, but the case is of Dr. Sam Sheppard. He was a doctor in the 50s that lived in the area of Cleveland, up in Ohio. His wife was killed pretty brutal and savage way, and he was convicted of that crime of murder, and spent years in prison in Ohio. He went through an appeals process, and one of the things that he argued, the core thing that he argued, was media bias and publicity and tainting of the jury pool and just other things related to the media. And the media had a lot of play in that. That was in the infancy of television, pretty much, for mainstream America. We had movies and those kinds of things, but by the 50s and 60s, a lot more people had TVs in their homes. So you had people that would sit down, watch the news, see the events of the day, as reported by whatever agency it was ABC or CBS or whatever outlet it may be. And now, you think about things now, you have an incident that happens, and it's published, and maybe the raw details, or even late, actual video of the incident, whether it's a shooting or a robbery or whatever it may be, is live. So things have changed a lot since then, but Sam Sheppard won that case in part because of the media bias and because of the things that happened and the irregularities that happened in that trial. So that's important to remember and to think about when it comes to the media and how that gets portrayed. I can say, unequivocally in my situation, this is my personal experiences, the media tended to sensationalize a lot of things. And, as to the thought or the allegation or the theory that I had affairs with my wife, yes, I did. I'm not proud of that, but it did happen. They implied that was a motive or a reasoning for what happened, and it absolutely wasn't. But there's other things in there in the course of the arrest to the discovery process when that information was released and made public, to other statements, other things people said. And I'm not gonna go through and argue every little detail or inaccuracy or falsehood or outright lie that happened, and they did exist. But the important thing is that the media gets information and they choose to spin it how they want to, and that can cause problems. And you can see how, going back to Dr. Sheppard's situation, that caused problems that have resulted in a reversal, and he was released from prison later on, and died some years later after he was released. So they never recharged him. In my case, I pled guilty. There was no trial to happen, so there was no jury pool to taint. And the publicity didn't really have an effect on. The only thing it served was to keep it in the news, to keep it a story for a period of time. And once that novelty or those accusations or whatever came out, okay, you got to find something else. And so they would go through and try to find something else, it seemed like, to make it fit their narrative of what actually occurred and why it happened and whatever. And none of those things were really relevant. So the news does what they do. They report things. I'd like to think they have the integrity to report what actually happened. Although, objectively, if two people are in a room and one shoots the other and one goes outside and gets arrested, you can reasonably draw inferences from what happened, but you're not going to be able to say for sure definitively what happened in that room, whether it was a struggle, there was a fight, someone was intoxicated, someone said something about, I'm going to kill you, whatever the situation may be. You're not going to know that unless you were there. So at best, you're getting information secondhand, second party, and so you can't really trust the veracity of that all the time. You have to ask your own questions. And that's something that I've learned over the years, is to be skeptical, to ask questions, and to find out information on your own instead of relying on other people to do that for you. So, the accusation of a charge or of an offense can ruin someone's life. I remember when I was an EMT, there was a police officer here in Louisville, and heard about a situation where he was accused of fondling his daughter. And those accusations were made in part by his ex-wife and also by the child at the time. Now, to the extent that whether the child was coerced or coaxed or whatever, I'm not really sure. But I do know the officer was accused of having sex with his daughter, abusing his daughter sexually, and that resulted in him losing his career. He was fired. There was an internal investigation. I don't believe it ever came to any kind of criminal charges, and if it did, they were dismissed. But I've talked to people that knew that officer since then. It was absolutely false, and it ruined him as a person, ruined him as a police officer, and destroyed his career. So that was just an accusation. It didn't ever really come to anything of substance, but it just shows you how an accusation can cause people to get kind of worry about you and not want to hire you, not want to give you a place to live, so on and so forth. So the media has I believe they have a duty to report the facts and report things that they know. But the problem with that is that they're also a business. They function off of ratings and off of advertisement and off of readership or viewership, however it may be, and it's a business. So they have to make. I'm not going to go so far as to say they make details up. I know that probably happens, but I'm not in the news, so I can't say that's how that internal situation works. I don't know that to be the case, but the news has a responsibility to report things accurately, whether they fall one way or the other, whether they fall against the police and the state and the prosecutor in a situation, or whether they fall against a defendant or a suspect or whatever that person is called at the time. I did choose to give an interview. I wouldn't say coached by my attorney, but I was given some points by my attorney to bring up and to talk about, and given some legal advice to not talk about if those questions were asked. The individual that interviewed me, he's since left the area and he's now working in the same field in a different state. But he interviewed me. I felt like that was my chance to get. This was in February of 2010, after I pled guilty and after final sentencing happened, before I went to the first after jail prison type facility. So I did give an interview. It was voluntary, and I didn't do it for any other reason other than to tell what happened. I didn't have that chance because the plea bargaining stopped everything. When you plea bargain, there's an administrative hearing that happens. It's called a Boykin hearing. Judge basically asks you, have you been coerced or promised anything outside of this agreement? Are you making this decision voluntarily and knowingly? Are you saying that you're guilty because you are guilty and you understand the rights that you're giving away or forfeiting as a result of pleading guilty? So at that moment, when that plea bargain happened and that Boykin hearing happened, it all stops. The discovery stops. Outside of any other maybe connected issue, administrative or civil lawsuits, things like that, the situation stops. So the only version they have is the discovery, the statements, and then what you pled guilty to. And they can draw their own inferences. People can draw their own inferences from all of that. Sometimes that's correct, sometimes it's not. There's been times where I've been, I've seen stories from that time. I've read those stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as it were, and I can see where even people in my own family made statements to the effect of, after they've read the discovery, that they would convict me too, that they didn't like what they read, but the sources of that stuff was of questionable origin, I would say. So the media doesn't really pick apart those things because they don't know the person they're reporting on. They just show everything false, good, or proven or otherwise. So the public does have a right to know what happens in a case, and different states have different rules and laws about whether the media is allowed in a court or not. And that's subject to the courts. I know federal courts generally don't allow any kind of media in the courts. You may have an arduous rendering of the suspect or of the defendant, but there's not videos typically or news media that's allowed in a federal courthouse or courtroom. In state courts, it varies. In Kentucky, it's a pretty common practice to have the news involved from the time the person's arrested until the time that they're convicted and even afterward. So that did happen in my case. There were some other I guess, sideline type matters, some motions and hearings and then also some other things that happened that were recorded or were in the media. Speaking from the defendant's side, having the media there, it was very scary to have a news camera in your face, or in the gallery or over on the side, and that they're looking at you. I'm not a movie star. I'm not the greatest of looking individuals, in case you can't tell, but I knew why they were there. They were there to film me and to get my reactions and to film the proceedings and what was going on. And that wasn't a comfortable feeling. There's people that I met when I was in prison that had similar type situations where they had, higher profile type cases, and some of them relished it. And that was them. That wasn't me. But, the right kind of person, I guess, could spin the media even, could make the court or the public like them in a situation. An example of that is the Frank and Jesse James. It's going back years and years and years, but that's a situation where, and then even more modern throughout the 30s, the Bonnie and Clyde, some of the stuff that happened, John Dillinger, Al Capone, he made the media like him. And those things happen. If you can take and have a situation that you're involved in, like organized crime in Chicago in the 30s, and you can twist the media and twist the opinion, then so be it. But on average, every criminal defendant isn't going to have those resources, and they're not going to be as affable and likable as Al Capone or Frank and Jesse James or Bonnie and Clyde. The media does need to be there, and they do need to be there for a few different reasons, I think. And it's part of it's in the Constitution. There's a right to the press and to freedom of speech and expression, those kinds of things, and those certainly apply to the media. But I also think that they're there to be a witness almost, and to be a record keeper, someone that makes a record of an event that happens. And so, outside of the official court channels, and most court hearings now are either video recorded, audio recorded, or both. Stenographers are pretty much falling out of favor. Some places still use them, transcripts and those kinds of things. But generally, everything is video and audio recorded, and paper transcript isn't even prepared anymore in a lot of places. So, media does have responsibility to present the information that they're given or they have access to responsibly, and that's the objection that I have sometimes when they don't do that correctly. And it can influence court, it can influence the public's opinion of a person, and it can change the result of a criminal trial. And so because of all those reasons, I think they definitely have a responsibility to act in the best interest of the public and the person that they're filming or involved with as a story. So, that's really all I have about the media, and some good notes there, I feel like. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below, and I will definitely get back to them. Thanks.